On New Year's Eve, I accidentally found that my husband had another mobile phone. Someone sent him a message, "The livelier it is, the more I miss you. It's so hard to sleep alone." He replied instantly, "Just hold on a little longer. I'll marry you soon." The woman's WeChat name was Yu, and my husband's was, "You are always on my mind." How ridiculous. After being together for 11 years, the person who vowed to love me for a lifetime wanted to marry someone else while I was pregnant. But why should I let the shameful traitor and the arrogant mistress succeed? On New Year's Eve, I watched the Spring Festival gala with my mother-in-law for a while and then my head started to ache. I was more than 2 months pregnant and had severe pregnancy reactions. Moreover, even slightly noisy sounds would cause my head to ache terribly. Oliver noticed that something was wrong with me and said considerately, "Go and rest if you're tired. I'll stay up with Mom to see the New Year in." My mother-in-law also quickly helped me to the bedroom. "Never mind staying up to see the New Year in. They're all old customs. Do whatever makes you comfortable. Go to sleep." Oliver and I had been in love for 10 years and got married for 1 year. This was the first time we spent the Spring Festival with my mother-in-law. I had often thought that I was so lucky to have a perfect lover and also meet a kind and amiable mother-in-law at the same time. My mother-in-law carefully tucked me in and asked me in detail what I wanted to eat on the morning of the first day of the Lunar New Year before leaving. Oliver sat beside me and said, "Go to sleep. I'll leave when you fall asleep." The fireworks outside the window lit up his gentle eyes and eyebrows. Over the past 10+ years, the relationships of our friends had their ups and downs, but we had always been an enviable love story. From campus to wedding dress, and we were about to welcome a new life. And he had always been the same young man who had eyes full of love for me, without any change. My heart was filled with warmth, and I couldn't help getting up and giving him a gentle kiss. Since I got pregnant, I had been following the doctor's advice to take care of the fetus, so we hadn't had sex. On this romantic New Year's Eve with brilliant fireworks, I suddenly wanted to give him a good kiss. However, he gently took my hands that were around his neck down, helped me lie down properly, and said in a low voice, "Go to sleep quickly. You're weak. You must have more rest." I knew that he was restraining himself again and again out of concern for the safety of me and the baby. I couldn't help but hold his hand tightly with a warm heart and said, "Happy New Year, honey. Happy New Year, Lorraine." With a smile, I fell asleep quickly. I was awakened by the deafening sound of firecrackers at midnight. I had a car accident not long ago and had some minor problems left. I was afraid of noise, darkness, and suffered from neurasthenia. I quickly got up to look for Oliver. There was no one in the living room. My mother-in-law had also gone to bed. Oliver was standing alone on the balcony looking at his mobile phone. I walked quickly towards him. Perhaps the sound of the firecrackers was too noisy. He was concentrating on typing messages and didn't notice that I had come to him at all. The screen showed the chat page on WeChat. A message sent by a person named Yu to him said, "The livelier it is, the more I miss you. It's so hard to sleep alone." His reply was, "Just hold on a little longer. I'll marry you soon." Yu, all right. I'm not in a hurry. You're mine for a lifetime. You can't escape even if you want to. Yu, stop sending messages. It'll be troublesome if she sees them. Oliver typed word by word right under my nose. "I'm sorry, baby. I'll love you twice as much and make it up to you." At that moment, it was as if there was a fire exploding in my mind. I snatched his mobile phone away. Oliver was startled and immediately tried to snatch it back, but I held it tightly and wouldn't let go. However, this wasn't the mobile phone he usually used. I didn't even know when he had hidden another mobile phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled up to look at his chat records with that woman. Presumably, he had been prepared and deleted them very cleanly. I only saw that at exactly midnight, he had transferred 1,314 yuan to that woman. After the woman received the money, she sent a series of kisses, and then came the conversations that I had just seen. And when I clicked on his WeChat name, it wasn't the WeChat account that I knew. Instead, it was called, "You Are Always on My Mind." How disgusting. I angrily held up the mobile phone. On the screen, there was a follow-up message from that woman, with your words, "I won't feel bitter no matter how long I wait." Bitter? So she's eager to be a mistress and is even touched by herself? And what about my so-called good husband? In the first half of the night, he was still talking with me about how to decorate the children's room and how to spoil our mother and daughter for a lifetime. In the second half of the night, he was flirting with someone else until he called her baby and even said he would marry her. I was shaking all over and slapped Oliver hard. "Lorraine, don't be like this. Don't get angry and harm your health. Listen to me explain. Explain? Looking at his hypocritical anxiety on his face, my eyes were filled with tears. Okay, explain. I'm all ears to hear your explanation. Oliver lowered his head and deeply buried his hands in his hair. She's a teammate I met while playing games. We don't have any real relationship. We just got familiar while playing. We talked about everything when playing with the game characters. We just lost our sense of propriety while chatting. I'll block her right away and promise that I'll never make you angry again. As he said that, he reached out to take the mobile phone. I put the mobile phone behind my back, feeling completely chilled in my heart. You never play games, Oliver. You're lying. After being together for 11 years, no one knew him better than I did. He looked at me eagerly. I'm not lying to you. You've gone to bed too early in these 2 months since you got pregnant. I was bored at night, so I started to learn to play games to kill time. Lorraine, believe me. The sincerity and regret in his eyes made me feel both aggrieved and heartbroken. Even if what he said was true, could emotional infidelity be forgiven? They were so familiar with their sweet talk. Could they be far from the next step of physical infidelity? I just felt my head buzzing and the headache was unbearable. I looked carefully at the man in front of me. Once, whenever he looked at me, his eyes were always filled with deep tenderness and love. But now, there was only guilt and evasion that were strange to me at the bottom of his eyes. Eyes can't lie. Was this really the Oliver who had loved me deeply for 11 years? When I was very young, my father resigned from his job in the system and went into business to improve our family's living conditions. Our family became the envy of our neighbors as a 10,000 yuan household in just a few years. However, my father spent less and less time at home. When he came back occasionally, he would either beat my mother or me. He once hit me so hard that my eardrum was perforated, which has caused problems with my right ear's hearing until now. As a result, I was especially resistant to men when I grew up. Whether they were male classmates or male teachers, I deeply rejected them with a mixture of fear and disgust, until I met Oliver in college. He slowly melted the ice in my heart with his bit by bit of warmth. I'll never forget that autumn when we went climbing in our junior year. We were so young back then. We always thought it was more interesting to climb the less crowded wild mountains instead of the crowded scenic areas. Suddenly, it started to rain heavily when we were halfway up the mountain, and we got lost. Because we had no experience, we didn't prepare any windbreakers or warm equipment. So he wrapped all his outer clothes and pants around me. His lips turned purple from the cold, but he still didn't forget to tell me jokes to ease my nervousness. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. It was noon, but it was terribly dark. The rumbling thunder rolled over our heads, gloomy and terrifying, and there was no mobile phone signal in the mountains. We were freezing to death and had no way to ask for help. We could only bite the bullet and search hard for the way we came in the fierce wind and heavy rain. I was so cold and scared that my weak crying was drowned out by the wind and rain. Oliver, if we can't get down the mountain, will we freeze to death here? He hugged me tightly. Don't be afraid, Lorraine. If anyone has to die, it'll only be me. I'll never let anything happen to you. Fortunately, we later met a family of villagers who were taking shelter from the rain in the mountains during the autumn harvest. They kindly gave us 2 sweaters to warm our bodies. I still can't forget that Oliver said to them with a crying voice at that time, I don't want them. Give them all to my girlfriend. As long as she's okay. But he was actually more severely hypothermic than I was. He went to the hospital as soon as we got down the mountain. Time is really terrifying. It actually made the person who loved me wholeheartedly back then betray me heartlessly. Moreover, he not only destroyed all my trust in him but also shattered my sanity. I stared at him blankly. It was as if I saw my father in my parents' marriage who became brutal and cold-blooded and whom I hated so much. My fingers gradually dug into my palms. I won't be as cowardly and forbearing as my mother. If I'm not happy, I'll never let him and that woman be happy either. Lorraine, say something. Don't scare me, okay? Oliver knelt in front of me, looking at my pale face and held my hand tightly. 11 years, Oliver. 11 years of feelings, and you just destroyed them like this. I glared at him with red eyes and pushed him away hard. He lost his balance and fell backward, knocking over the fruit plate on the coffee table. The noise startled my mother-in-law and she quickly put on her clothes and ran out. What's going on? Why are you quarreling when everything was fine? I held up the screen of the mobile phone to her and smiled sarcastically. Oliver has cheated on me. My mother-in-law's face changed drastically. She immediately warmed my trembling and cold hands in her palms. Don't be impatient, Lorraine. Lorraine, no matter what happens, Mom will stand up for you. This promise of standing up for me immediately made the tears that I had held back for a long time burst out. When I was a child, after my mother and I were abandoned by my father, my mother had too much pressure in life and spirit. She often beat and scolded me and never had a kind face towards me. And after I went to high school, she formed a new family and had a new child. Since then, I gradually lost my home. When people are wronged outside, the first person they usually want to talk to and rely on is their mother. But I had always only had myself. Now, this motherly warmth from my mother-in-law instantly made my tears pour down like rain. Seeing that I was sobbing uncontrollably, my mother-in-law quickly put her arm around my shoulders and was so anxious that her voice became hoarse. Don't cry, Lorraine. Listen to Mom. If Oliver really did such a thing, I'll never forgive him. The angrier she got, the more she rushed over and punched Oliver twice and then slapped him hard. If you really dare to do such a shameful thing as cheating, I won't recognize you as my son. My mother-in-law hit quite hard, and Oliver's face quickly swelled up, the corners of his eyes were red. He looked at her and said, Mom, I'm wrong. He covered his eyes, took a deep breath, and then his voice choked up. I shouldn't have passed the time by having an online relationship, but I didn't meet her in person and didn't betray Lorraine. I didn't. My mother-in-law angrily scolded him, if you dare to lie, don't expect Lorraine to forgive you, and I won't forgive you either. As she said that, she actually snatched the mobile phone from my hand and directly dialed a video call to that UU. The other side picked it up quickly. I saw a young and bright smiling face. However, that smile froze on her face the moment she saw my mother-in-law on this end of the video call. My mother-in-law immediately started scolding, don't you know that Oliver is married? You're young. Why don't you do something good instead of trying to break up other people's families? If your parents didn't teach you how to behave properly, I'll teach you a good lesson today. The girl took a deep breath and retorted unceremoniously, we were just chatting. How did I break up his family? We were just playing as a couple or husband and wife in the game. We haven't even met in person. Whose business is it bothering? If he really wants to get divorced, that's his problem. Go educate your son. It has nothing to do with me. After saying that, she angrily hung up the video call. Naturally, my mother-in-law was extremely angry. She then scolded Oliver for a long time. After watching him block the girl, she turned around to comfort me instead. Mom knows you're feeling aggrieved, but at least Oliver was just causing trouble online. For Mom's sake, please forgive him this time, okay? Oliver has liked you since he was 18. For so many years, he's always been devoted to you. In fact, for you, My mother-in-law suddenly burst into tears and covered her face, sobbing. After a while, she managed to calm down her emotions and choked with sobs as she begged me. Mom has watched Oliver like you for so many years. He truly only has you in his heart. Oh, Lorraine, please don't get too angry and hurt your health. Mom is begging you. Mom just hopes that each of you will be safe and sound. Please be safe and sound. With a splitting headache, I numbly listened to her crying and stared blankly at Oliver, whose face was gloomy and eyes were full of remorse. We were each other's first love. It's impossible to just let go of the feelings that have accompanied us from our youth to the present. But I've already lost confidence in the future, so I don't intend to keep his child. The bitterness of a broken family, I'll bear it alone. I'll never let the child live in that suffocating shadow like I do. After the holiday is over, I'll avoid them and go alone to have an abortion. The spring festival holiday, a time for family reunions, was like torture for me, with each day feeling like a year. From the moment I got up in the morning until I went to bed at night, Oliver was constantly being careful to please me. He destroyed that mobile phone card right in front of me and swore that he would never do anything to make me sad again, and my mother-in-law tried all kinds of ways to cook delicious food for me and racked her brains to make me happy. Even Oliver took the initiative and came to me with a hair clipper in a rather cheeky way. Lorraine, cut my hair for me again. It was at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. We had been staying at home to avoid the virus for several months. I saw Oliver's hair growing longer and longer, and I joked about braiding it for him. But he seriously took a razor and asked me to trim the broken hair on his forehead that was blocking his eyes. He was really bold in his idea, and I was really bold in doing it. I was blindly confident that it wouldn't be difficult to cut the long parts a bit shorter in layers. As a result, I accidentally cut his hair into a shape like that of Watermelon Boy. We threw down the razor and hugged each other, laughing hysterically in front of the mirror. Not only was he not angry with me, but he also praised me for being creative and said that I had let him experience a different look. But God knows, he's a respected manager. During the video conference, when he was deploying work to his subordinates with that watermelon-shaped haircut, his subordinates were first shocked and then burst out laughing. But he wasn't in a hurry or angry. He cleared his throat and said, "It's the first time my wife cut my hair. Is it so hard for you to show some respect?" Who could know how I felt at that moment? My heart felt as if it was filled with soft toffees, so sweet that it was almost too much. But looking at Oliver, who was deliberately trying to please me now, I just felt that things had changed and my heart was filled with bitterness. Of course, I didn't have the mood to cut his hair for him again. However, we used to have so many wonderful memories. When at a certain moment, those memories flooded into my mind one after another. Coupled with Oliver's sincere repentance and my mother-in-law's meticulous care, the tense atmosphere between us eased up a lot involuntarily. On the 7th day of the first lunar month, before Oliver went to work, he repeatedly told my mother-in-law that since she was taking care of me at home alone, she must pay attention to certain details and call him immediately if anything happened. That he had always been extremely careful and considerate towards me. It would be a lie to say that I wasn't touched. So much so that when I lied to my mother-in-law that I was going to the property management to update my access card, but actually planned to go to the hospital for an abortion, I sat in the car and couldn't bring myself to start the engine for a long time. After all, it was flesh and blood growing inside my body. I had been carefully taking care of it for more than 2 months. Now that I really had to get rid of it, it was impossible for me not to feel sad at all. I closed my eyes, and my mind was full of Oliver's kindness to me. Even the night before, I had a strange nightmare. I dreamed that I jumped from the roof of the hospital, and Oliver cried bitterly and used his body to cushion under me, begging me and the child to live well with blood all over his face. I'm not superstitious, but this dream still made me feel very uncomfortable. And my head started to ache again bit by bit. Finally, with red eyes, I got out of the car and walked home. After that car accident, the doctor had told me to try not to drive alone as much as possible. I also didn't want to put myself in danger again right after narrowly escaping an accident. When I opened the door of our home and just changed into my slippers, I heard my mother-in-law crying in her bedroom. To be honest, no matter how big the conflict was between Oliver and me, I was truly grateful for and liked my mother-in-law. So I quickly wanted to go and see what was wrong with her. But the moment I walked to her door and clearly heard her voice, I froze all over. Mom dreams of bringing you home every day. As for Lorraine, we'll always find a way. It's just that you've been wronged. Mom will definitely love you twice as much in the future. Our family will never be separated again. The sound of my mother-in-law crying on the phone was like a drill drilling into my brain. I covered my head, which was aching sharply, and could hardly breathe. She said that she and the mistress were a family? What about me? What a good act they put on, mother and son. Were they treating me like a fool? I backed away again and quickly ran out of the house. On the cold street in the unfamiliar North City, I sadly realized that I didn't even have anyone to talk to. 2 years ago, Oliver performed outstandingly at work, and the head office sent him to North City to open a branch and serve as the general manager of the branch. It was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity, but he couldn't bear to leave me alone and didn't want to be separated from me. To help him with his career and to avoid changes in our relationship due to long-term living in different places, I didn't hesitate to resign and accompanied him to North City. After everything was settled, during the break while I was looking for a job, I casually posted the delicious food I usually made on my video account. Unexpectedly, I gained a lot of fans and invitations from the platform in a short time. So I simply focused on becoming a food blogger. This way, I could have more time to take care of our small family and also have my own independent career and income. But the drawback was that I gradually became separated from the social circle. Every day, I interacted with some strange netizens. That's also why I was especially heartbroken when I learned that Oliver had betrayed me through online dating. Because I knew all too well that as we got more and more familiar with netizens and our feelings deepened, it would naturally lead to real-life interactions. And what made me even more desperate now was that he probably wasn't just having an online affair. He had actually cheated on me, and my mother-in-law had even joined hands with him to deceive me. That mistress was really good at manipulating things. She managed to win over Oliver's mother even before Oliver got divorced. But why? Why should I let the shameful cheater and the arrogant mistress succeed? Losing their reputations and causing a big mess should be their fate. The more I loved, the more I hated. I wiped my eyes desperately, crushing the tears one by one in the palm of my hand. After calming down my emotions, I went home. My mother-in-law was cooking lunch for me in the kitchen. There were all kinds of washed vegetables neatly arranged on the countertop. I guessed you should be back soon, and here you are. She smiled and welcomed me. I've made a bowl of red date and white fungus soup for you. Come and warm yourself up. Looking at her hypocritical smiling face, I also forced a smile. Thanks for your hard work, Mom. My mother-in-law walked towards the kitchen to serve me the soup while smiling and said, "Silly child, there's no need to be polite with Mom." "Alright, then there's no need to be polite." I sneered at her back. "Mom, I want to eat dumplings for lunch." "Want to eat dumplings?" My mother-in-law handed the white fungus soup to me. "I've already made clay pot rice. Can we have dumplings tonight instead?" "I don't feel like eating clay pot rice. I just want dumplings, with pork and Chinese cabbage filling. Don't use a meat grinder for the vegetables and meat. Hand-chopped ones taste better." My mother-in-law looked at the time and smiled. Alright. Mom will make them for you right away." Seeing that she started kneading the dough and chopping the filling and was busy without a break, I quietly went to her room. I knew her password and successfully unlocked her phone. However, both the call records and chat apps had been deleted completely. I couldn't get any information about that mistress at all. I couldn't help but admire her. At her age, she was so good at both acting and covering her tracks. I thought for a moment and then tried to search for the address management of her on several shopping apps. I frowned and looked at them one by one. Soon, my eyes fixed on a recipient named Miss Sue. That address and house number made my head suddenly buzz. I walked to the balcony with weak legs, step by step, and looked at the household right opposite mine. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. No wonder Oliver had always liked to stare blankly at the balcony recently. No wonder. Is the most dangerous place the safest one? So they were having an affair right under my nose. I forcibly suppressed the anger in my heart and immediately went back to my room to call my former colleague who I had a good relationship with and was in another city. Last year, she went through her husband's affair and a divorce battle and had hired several private detectives. I got those phone numbers, and sure enough, there was one that also provided services in the North City. After sending some information about Oliver as required by the other party and arranging everything properly, I immediately went to the property management office. I deliberately reported that house number and said that something placed at the door was lost, asking the property management to help check the surveillance. The property management first verified the owner's name with me. "Is it Ms. Suyuyu?" I felt dizzy for a moment. I never expected that Oliver had bought a house for her in her name. "And I will get back every penny he spent on her." I pressed my aching temples tightly and nodded with a hoarse voice. "Yes. Please sign here and follow me to the central control room." "Okay, thank you." The surveillance footage was quickly played back for me from near to far. For several consecutive days, there was no movement at all, until the first day of the Lunar New Year when it was just dawn, that Suyuyu left the building entrance wearing a hat and a mask, all wrapped up tightly and dragging a suitcase. No wonder my mother-in-law couldn't wait to contact her as soon as I went out today. It turned out that on New Year's Eve, I discovered their relationship and was forced to drive Suyuyu away, and she couldn't let go of Suyuyu. I stared at the screen intently, suppressing my anger with great effort. Going further back. On the evening of the 27th day of the 12th lunar month, a little after 7 o'clock, I clearly saw Oliver's figure entering the building, and for several nights before the spring festival, he said that he had to work overtime for the holiday and didn't come back until after 11 o'clock at night every day. It turned out that he was working overtime in his mistress's house. They were not online friends who had never met. They were shameless cheaters having an affair. I would rather he told me the truth after betraying me than that they, mother and son, bullied me so blatantly when I had no parents to support me. I endured the severe pain in my head and left the property management office with unsteady steps. Sure enough, the knife stabbed by the person you love the most hurts the most. But I can't just take this stab in vain. I will stab back. I will hand over all the dirty chat records on New Year's Eve that I saved and the evidence I got from the private detective later to Oliver's company. It's enough to get him fired and ruin his career. I will also take advantage of my hundreds of thousands of followers to expose his and Suyuyu's scandal. I will make them become rats crossing the street that everyone shouts at. I will make them unable to show their faces in public from now on. With my heart aching as if stabbed by a knife, I held onto the small tree by the roadside and took a deep breath with great difficulty. Just then, the phone rang. It was that private detective. I didn't expect him to reply so quickly and quickly picked up the phone. "Miss Lorraine, are you sure the information you provided to us is accurate?" Yes, what's the matter? But the Mr. Oliver you provided, he has passed away. The word passed away made my brain go blank for a few seconds. These words sounded so familiar. It seemed that I had heard them somewhere. Immediately, all kinds of chaotic and sharp sounds mixed together rang crazily in my mind. There were harsh breaking sounds. There were violent collision sounds. There were whistling siren sounds. There were also heartbroken crying sounds. There were also many different men's and women's voices, sometimes far and sometimes near. Mr. Oliver has passed away. Please accept our condolences. Ms. Lorraine, please calm down. Once a person dies, they can't come back to life. Only if you live well can he rest in peace. Who is Mr. Oliver's family member? Please sign on the body cremation form. It was so noisy, really too noisy. What on earth had happened? I covered my extremely painful head and gasped for breath. Girl, are you feeling unwell? Do you need help? Faintly, I heard the voice of a passerby asking. I looked around blankly. But my vision was a blank expanse and I couldn't see anything. Only Oliver's face, sometimes blurry and sometimes clear. Ah, right, I seem to remember. On the day of the car accident, I was the only one in the car, not him. It was just a minor accident. I didn't die, so how could he possibly be dead? I covered my ears and shook my head desperately. They said you were dead. They were lying to me, right? They just didn't want to help me investigate you, so they made up lies to deceive me. Is that right? Suddenly, the Oliver in front of me disappeared. I opened my eyes wide and looked around for him, but saw that he was lying beside me with a pale face, covered with a white cloth. I shuddered violently and quickly went to hug him. Don't be afraid, Oliver. I'll take you home right away. I won't let them leave you alone in the morgue. But when the hand that I wanted to hug him touched only the cold ground, I froze in horror. In my head that was about to split from pain, suddenly many messy fragments began to piece together in an instant. All at once, I saw the scene of the car accident that day, the blood everywhere. The dazzling red blood gradually revived my memory bit by bit. I desperately tried to touch and kiss that blood. Because it was all from my Oliver. It was the blood he shed for me. I lay on the ground and wept bitterly. Don't go, Oliver. Don't leave me alone, okay? The huge fear and pain of my heart being suddenly emptied made me black out and I couldn't see anything. When I woke up, I was lying in the hospital. Lorraine, how are you feeling? Don't scare Mom. Mom really can't bear to be scared anymore. My mother-in-law's eyes were red and swollen, and her voice was terribly hoarse. I reached out and held her slightly trembling hand and asked about the thing I was most afraid of. Mom, how's my baby? Is he okay? My mother-in-law nodded repeatedly. The baby is fine. Just rest and take care of yourself. When you go home, Mom will cook you something delicious. You'll recover after getting some nourishment. I let out a sigh of relief, and tears immediately flowed down from the corners of my eyes. My baby with Oliver mustn't have anything happen to him. Seeing that I was crying, my mother-in-law quickly helped me wipe away the tears. Don't be nervous. The doctor said that you suddenly fainted today because of the head injury from the previous car accident. You can't rush this. You need to recover slowly. It's all my fault for being careless. From now on, no matter where you go, I won't let you go out by yourself. Either I'll accompany you or Oliver will accompany you. We definitely won't let what happened today happen again. I looked at the Oliver beside her who was looking extremely anxious, and I had mixed feelings in my heart. Guilt, gratitude, shame. All kinds of emotions intertwined, making me even feel ashamed to face him. My head was still hurting terribly. But now, I remembered everything. The person who loved me the most in this world, my Oliver, had left me forever. And after I couldn't accept his departure and attempted suicide and was rescued, the extreme pain made my injured brain start stress protection and escape from everything that happened that day. I lost a lot of hair and I forgot many things. But I remembered every bit of the time with Oliver clearly. I was sick. I firmly believed that he wasn't at the scene of the car accident that day, so he would always be by my side forever. And the people in front of me, his kind mother and younger brother, were willing to act for me. They just wanted me to live well, not to remember that heartbreaking scene again and not to do the stupid thing of following Oliver. But how can I live well? My Oliver, he died for me. Every time I opened or closed my eyes, I felt countless stabs of remorse in my heart. I regretted why I went to that restaurant that day, why I took that road, why I didn't go a little earlier or a little later, why it had to be at that exact time. That day more than a month ago was my birthday. In the past, whenever either of us had a birthday, the two of us would take a day off to accompany each other. But on that day, Oliver happened to have an important client visiting, and he was busy until noon. We had agreed to have lunch at a popular online restaurant that I had been longing to go to because I wanted to taste those popular online dishes and try making them myself. There was no other reason. It was just that Oliver loved the meals I cooked the most. I changed the dishes every noon to bring him nutritious and delicious love-packed lunches, but recently I really couldn't think of new recipes, so I wanted to go out to find inspiration. He originally said that he would come home to pick me up, but I called a car in advance to go to his company to wait for him. With flowers, cakes, and delicious food, it would be inconvenient to drive by myself if I wanted to drink some wine. And in the car, we had a little quarrel. A fan friend always had trouble mastering the heat for a dessert and asked me for help several times. So I repeatedly looked at the steps she sent to help her find the problem. Oliver advised me several times not to look at my phone. He said that I was constantly looking at my phone every day and it was especially harmful to my eyes to look at the screen in the car. But at that time, I just wanted to solve the problem quickly and ignored him. He smiled and flicked my head, but that made me angry and I told him to leave me alone with a dark face. Later, I always couldn't recall whether the flick on my head really hurt that much. Or rather, how much could it hurt? Was it worth my being so mean to him? So much so that after he could never take care of me again, I regretted it day and night, feeling as if my heart was being torn apart. Because not long after I was mean to him, the car shook violently. I only heard the driver curse in a panic and the huge collision from the oncoming lane burst out in the next second. Oliver, who was sitting behind the driver, instantly hugged me tightly in his arms. He held me tightly to his chest, one hand firmly clasping my body, and the other arm tightly circled to protect my head. Although we were all wearing seat belts, when the violent impact made the car roll over with us in it, our bodies were still violently bumped. It was Oliver's sturdy body that was like an indestructible protective shield, firmly holding me tight and using his body to block the terrible impact and harm for me. And his blood, from a drop or two at first, gradually flowed all over my face and body like a flood. "Lorraine, don't be afraid. It's okay." That was the comforting word he shouted in a hurry when he was protecting me. "Don't cry, Lorraine. Well." That was the last sentence he painfully murmured in my ear when he was still desperately holding me tightly and refused to let go even a little bit despite the severe pain of his body being pierced and squeezed. It was the last sentence he left for me in this world. His scalding hot blood soaked my whole body. I was painfully aware that when we were in the mountain lashed by the violent rainstorm in our junior year, when he said that if anyone had to die, it would only be him and that he would never let anything happen to me, he really meant it. But I would rather he had just been saying it. I would rather have died with him than accept such an ending. Later, I heard that when we were rescued by the firefighters, Oliver's already stiff body was still tightly holding on to me. Even though they had dealt with countless tragic car accidents, when they rescued me, covered in blood, from his lifelong protection until death, they all shed tears. Beside his body, in a mess and broken, were the cake and flowers he had carefully customized for me. That was the last birthday I had in my life. Since then, I've never celebrated my birthday again. The painful memories made my tears flow like a river. I looked at my mother-in-law, who was full of concern for me in front of the hospital bed, and Zachary, Oliver's younger brother. I couldn't describe the gratitude and indebtedness in my heart at all. Zachary looked at me with red eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry, Lorraine. Don't cry. It's all my fault. I swear I'll never make you sad again." He repeated with a choked voice, "I swear." My mother-in-law cried and pushed him, "Kneel down in front of Lorraine and swear." They still thought that I was crying because of his cheating. I quickly got up and held Zachary, looking at them with teary eyes, and slowly knelt down on the hospital bed in front of them. My mother-in-law hurriedly held me up. "Lorraine, what are you doing? I'm the one who should say sorry." "Mom, I'm sorry." I burst into bitter tears. The one who crashed into our car was a drunk and crazy driver. That madman and our driver died on the spot. Oliver was originally sitting in the seat behind the driver. There was still some space in that seat that could allow people to survive until the car was completely damaged, but he chose to lean over to protect me. I owed his son a life. Perhaps a mother might lose her sanity and hate me, scold me, or even hit me under the intense pain of losing her son. But at her son's funeral, when I was crying bitterly and said, after Oliver left, "I'll never have any relatives again," she hugged me tightly and told me that from then on, their whole family would always be my relatives. Moreover, after I attempted suicide and was rescued, and when she saw that my mind was disordered due to illness, she resolutely took her other son and accompanied me in acting, carefully protecting me to live safely. The warmth she gave me was even more than that given by my own mother. However, after mistakenly thinking that my Oliver had betrayed me, I deliberately made things difficult for her and even almost killed the child of Oliver and me, the grandson who was the support of her belief. I cried bitterly and repented to them. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Zachary. I've remembered everything. I'm sorry. The two of them were stunned. Then my mother-in-law hugged me, and we cried in each other's arms. At that time, I was deeply trapped in the scene of Oliver's death and couldn't get out. I especially couldn't forgive myself. Why did I get angry with him over such a trifle that day? Even if our last time together had been sweet and the last memory he had of this world was warm and happy, I wouldn't have been so painful and desperate. So I couldn't live in peace at all. When I attempted suicide to follow Oliver, I didn't know that I was already pregnant. That little flesh and blood of ours was so tenacious. He accompanied me in death, in illness, in pain, and in life. So when I recovered my memory and learned that there was still this precious gift from Oliver left in the world to accompany me, no matter how painful I was, I told myself that I must live strongly. At first, we couldn't hide the news of Oliver's death from Grandma Lou. The old woman, who lost her beloved grandson, fell ill and couldn't get up. So my father-in-law stayed in our hometown to take care of her, while my mother-in-law brought Zachary and his girlfriend to the North City to take care of me. Who would have thought that after I woke up from my suicide attempt, my memory in my brain was disordered? I firmly believed that Oliver had been at work all day that day and hadn't taken the time to accompany me for my birthday, so I was the only one in the car accident. In order to let me regain the courage to live, they went along with me and asked all the people who knew about it, including my attending doctor, to hide the news of Oliver's death from me and fabricated such a beautiful lie for me. Now, my dream was shattered. And so was my heart. However, I still had to strive to move forward in the future. Time passed quickly. In the warm company of my parents-in-law's family, on a sunny afternoon, the baby of Oliver and I came into this world. He was a lovely little boy. I named him Isaiah. Perhaps God took pity on me. Usually, a son takes after his mother, but as Isaiah grew up, his eyes and eyebrows looked more and more like Oliver's. On the day when Isaiah was weaned, the day when I finally didn't have to be careful and suppress my grief anymore and didn't have to worry that my grief would hurt him, I went alone to the street where Oliver and I had the accident that night. Under the street lamp with the leaves swaying, I stood on the road where our car had been hit and flown away at that time. The faint black marks and scratches on the ground made me feel as if I was still in Oliver's firm and powerful embrace that day. I squatted on the ground and gently stroked the marks that seemed to be Oliver's blood. Whether it was or not, so what? I knew he was here. I stroked and stroked. But I just couldn't get enough. I simply lay on the ground, as if in this way I could tightly hold Oliver and let him know how much I missed him. My tears fell on the ground one by one and melted into his blood one by one. Oliver, may you rest in peace. I will bring up our son well. And then, I'll come to find you. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, 20 years have passed. For 20 years, I've always lived with my parents-in-law. They loved me as if I were their own daughter, and I also loved them as if they were my biological parents. Until I sent them off one after another as they fell ill due to long-term depression. Seeing that Isaiah was truly loved and cared for by my uncles and aunts, I finally had no more concerns. I was afraid that it would be too long and Oliver couldn't wait. In fact, I had been hiding it from everyone. Over the years, my illness had become more and more serious. I was suffering from headaches all the time and couldn't sleep all night long. How long can a person live by relying on painkillers while staying awake day and night? It was already my limit to be able to hold on and send my parents-in-law away on behalf of Oliver. On a summer night, the stars were shining brightly. It was the anniversary of the first time Oliver and I met. I carefully put on a light makeup for myself and swallowed the pills that could finally let me have a good sleep. I hugged Oliver's photo and fell asleep with a smile. Suddenly, Oliver's sigh sounded in my ear. "Lorraine, you're not obedient." I hurriedly opened my eyes. Oliver was actually standing beside my bed, smiling and reaching out his hand to me. I threw myself into his arms and hugged him tightly, tightly. My tears wet his whole body. "How nice, Oliver, you're still by my side." During the countless days and nights in the past 20 years, I had been sad countless times in sleeplessness and pain. Why wasn't my Oliver by my side? Now, my lover, he finally came back to me. We will never be separated forever. Zachary's side story. I'm 2 years younger than my brother. We look very much alike, but our personalities are completely different. In my mother's words, my brother is an angel sent to her by God, while I'm a naughty monkey given as a bonus when paying the phone bill. My brother is a straight-A student, while I'm a poor student. And I'm the kind of poor student who can't be improved no matter how hard the straight-A student tries to help. My brother is steady and polite, while I'm a troublemaker who argues with everyone. But this doesn't affect our good relationship as brothers at all. Especially when I did terribly in the college entrance examination and my parents had to send me abroad to get an overseas degree to rely on. When I was most depressed and thought I was a useless person, my brother put his arm around my shoulders and told me that everyone is born useful. As long as I happily carved out a world that I liked, everything at home would be taken care of by him and I didn't need to worry about it. It was precisely because of my brother's constant encouragement and support, and my parents had never complained or scolded me, their troublesome son, that the whole family used love and warmth to cheer me up when I was downcast. Only then was I able to put down my burden and become relaxed again. Gradually, my outgoing personality enabled me to do well abroad. I even made a lot of money by relying on my little cleverness when I was studying abroad. After graduation, I registered my own trading company and was full of enthusiasm to make a big splash. But just at this time, something happened to my brother. When I received my mother's phone call and she was crying so hard that she could hardly breathe, my legs went weak. I flew back to China overnight. When I saw my brother's body that the mortician had tried hard to piece together, I, who had hardly shed a few tears since childhood, couldn't help crying bitterly. I cursed that God had no eyes. If one of us brothers had to have a short life, it should have been me.